France is broke. To pay off her massive debts to the world, the budget for this video has been requisitioned by the king via austerity measures, which is why our video has been reduced to 10 minutes of paper cutouts. France was so broke because of a string of costly wars, rampant overspending of self-serving art projects, and the massive support for the American Revolution. Most important, however, was the lack of an effective tax collection due to the inability of taxing the First Estate, the clergy, who were even allowed to collect their own tax, the tithe, and the Second Estate, the nobility, who owned 25% of the land of France and were tax-exempt as well. The First and Second Estates owned about half the land in France, where the money came from, none of which was taxed. So all the country's burden fell upon the Third Estate, the 98% of the population who were peasants and commoners. After many years of excessive taxes, the failure of the 1788 harvest due to a hailstorm sent the cost of food skyrocketing, and the people could not eat. Since there was nothing to buy and nothing to pay with due to the taxes, many got very angry. The king attempted to fix the problem by calling the Estates General, a kind of meeting for all of France, where any attempt at reform was shot down by the clergy and the nobles. The commoners simply left after being kicked out by the king, who had sided with the nobles, and the Constituent, later National, Assembly was formed, and which later wrote the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen, and was the basis of the first French Constitution, which did not last long. The revolutionaries, who are mostly poor women and men, stormed the Bastille to steal guns upon July 14th, 1789, and eventually they march on Versailles and force the king into obeying the National Assembly and force the creation of a constitutional monarchy that France needed. Or so it would have been, had the revolution stopped there. Instead, it turned more radical as time went on, and would soon tear the country apart. The previous phase was called the bourgeois phase, marked by responses to the food crisis. Nearly everyone participated in the revolution. When the king attempted to flee Paris on July 20th, 1791, it is the beginning of the shift into the radical phase, where the revolution becomes blood-soaked. The king is caught and arrested, and put on trial and executed by one vote via the guillotine, heralding the beginning of the radical phase of the revolution. The terror begins in earnest as the Jacobins, the most radical of the factions, besides the sans-culottes, who are radicals, and the Girondists, who are more reasonable. Maximilien Robespierre creates the Committee for Public Safety. Basically, secret police, found only in dystopian novels, but far more real. It executed around 16,500 people for being, quote, enemies of the revolution, end quote, many of whom who had done nothing wrong. Executions are nearly endless for 2 years, and assassinations are common. Marat is killed, along with hundreds of others. Eventually, even Robespierre himself is killed via guillotine for being an enemy of the revolution. The months are renamed, and the day is split into 10 hours, and land is redistributed by the pseudo-socialists in the new revolutionary government. The Austrians and Prussians during this time have been unsuccessfully invading France, who has been defeating them via sheer weight of numbers and via the excellent command by Napoleon Bonaparte. Several coups and counter-coups and constitutions later, Napoleon will have risen to the top and be declared the first consul of France in 1799, and later emperor. Before that, he would have to put down the attempted royalist coup of October 1795, where he will mass his artillery in the streets of Paris and slaughter the entire coup with a single volley. The Directory is a rule of France by 5 men who had replaced the National Convention earlier that year. Napoleon successfully invades most of Italy and eventually Egypt, where he retreats due to bad supply. He returns to France, and his own coup will make him the first consul of France, an old position once held during the Roman Empire, and effectively becomes dictator of France, and leads her to victory after victory, until he is eventually defeated by the Russians, British, and Prussians in the War of the Sixth Coalition. He comes back and is defeated at the Battle of Waterloo, and is exiled to St. Helena, and the revolution ends with the end of the Napoleonic Wars. Though some would say the revolution ended when Napoleon took power.